Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 13th episode of your new favorite internet show, Visioncon Live. I'm your host, Zach Wilson, but you didn't come here to see me today. You came to see the man of the hour. He voices Renji from Bleach, the Riddler from Batman Arkham series, Wild Tiger from Tiger and Bunny, just to name a few, the only man with better hair than me. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the one, the only, Wally Wingert. Wally, how you doing today?
I say it's a tie, because that's some pretty good hair.
See,
now, how old are you, Zach?
I'm almost 25.
Okay, yeah, I had hair a lot like that when I was 25, and you know, as you get older, it's tough to keep, but you can do it if you take your vitamins and say your prayers, and you can. All this is mine. It's
well, see,
so you'll be able to keep it. You just have to be very diligent about it.
See, and honest to God, I mean, that means a lot for me to hear you say that because, you know, I've had guests and people just tell me they love my hair. And it does, you know, make me happy, mean a lot to me. But when you say it, I will admit it means even more because, Wally, you and we're brother in arms, okay? In a society that says men need to have short hair, we say no.
I was just sitting here looking at you thinking that I might have known your mom at some point in my life.
I mean, there's a possibility. I mean, you are quite the rock star, Wally. And that's actually something I want to lead us into. Wally, you're an actor, a voice actor, a musician, a puppeteer. At one point, the announcer for the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Wally, where do we begin? Well, I mean, I know where to begin. I want to start us at the very beginning. Now, growing up, Wally, was this the goal to be one of the most, not only one of the most well-known voice actors, but just a tour de force when it comes to the entertainment industry? Was that always the goal, or kind of along the road were there steps and bumps that got us to where we are today?
Well, there was a very prophetic moment that happened when I was young. It kills me when I hear 25, 26, 32, 33, 34-year-olds saying, I don't know what I want to do in life. And I'm like, are you kidding? I knew what I wanted to be since I was 5 years old. I didn't quite have a handle on exactly what I wanted to do, but I saw a show called The Munsters. If you remember The Munsters, it was an old black and white show about Frankenstein as the dad, a cool vampire lady as the mom, a little werewolf kid, and then the grandpa was Dracula. And the outcast, the outcast of the family was the pretty girl, was Marilyn Munster. It was terrific. But there was this kid that played Eddie Munster named Butch Patrick, and he was about probably 8 or 9 at the time. But he got to put on cool pointed ears and cool, you know, wolf makeup and you know, hang out with Frankenstein and Dracula and the vampire lady. And I thought when I was a kid, that's what I want to do. I want to be on TV wearing makeup and doing that. And then somebody told me the most amazing thing that changed my life. And they said, well, you know, he gets paid to do that. I said, you get to be on TV and you get paid? Sign me up. So ever since I was 5, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I had these costumes that I would put together as a kid. I'd dress up, even when it wasn't Halloween. And when you're living in the Midwest, in a small town, and you dress up and it's not Halloween, it's not really understood by the locals. They don't really get it. That you're putting rubber fangs in your mouth and you're put a black ring on your finger and a cape, and you're running around trying to bite the necks of the girls in the neighborhood. They don't really understand that. So thank God my parents did not put me in any therapy or anything, but I kind of knew what I wanted to do. But in the Midwest, if you have performance capabilities and an aptitude for that kind of thing, really the only logical alternative is to go into radio, because that's the only way to showcase any sort of ability. So where I grew up, there wasn't any community theater or any opportunities like that. But hey, I could get into radio. I could be on the radio and people would listen. You know, 10, maybe 20 people would listen. That's a big audience for me. So I got into radio and I always did voices ever since I was a little kid. I used to do all the Sesame Street voices when I was young and all kinds of other stuff. So when I went into radio, I said, well, now I can do some of my vocal characterizations as well on the radio. I can actually talk to myself. So I interviewed, you know, Darth Vader, and I interviewed all kinds of people, Santa Claus. So that was kind of the start of the whole thing when I came out here to Los Angeles in '87 to be an actor, not knowing what that entailed. It didn't take long before I lost interest in on-camera acting, because all they really wanted were types. They didn't want actors. They wanted a type, and they would look at you as soon as you walked through the door, and they say, oh, he looks like Zach. We're not going to have him. because he has long hair. But they haven't even seen me, perform my audition yet, which I thought was really unfair. So I wasn't that much interested in being a type. So a friend of mine said, well, you should go into voiceover because you could do voices, and it's kind of age blind, it's color blind, it's gender blind. They really don't care what you look like as long as you've got the sound, and that appealed to me. I'm like, oh, that's great. I can look like anything I want, and I can be a squirrel and a teenage boy and a talking fish and a giant all in one day, and an old man. And you come home and you're like, wow, I was like 7, 8 people today. That was a lot of fun. So that really kind of appealed to my multiple personality disorder. So I thought this is really the job for me. So I quickly, like I said, lost interest in on camera because I didn't want to really be a type. And then found the voiceover thing. And I said, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do.
So did your radio work directly influence your role to get into voice acting, or were those just kind of coincidences that did help eventually, make you ascend to a top tier voice actor?
That training in radio did help considerably because I knew how to work a mic, and I had been a board operator and a studio engineer. So I knew that when I got into the voiceover situation, what the studio engineer was doing and what the pots were. So very seldom does an actor know also the technical side of the industry as well as the creative side where you're on, well, it's all creative, but the performance side of it, to where you can walk into the control room and go, oh, wow, that's a 32 channel, blah, 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 with it. Does that have the, so they, how do you know all this stuff? I'm an old radio guy. So it was pretty fun, but absolutely. Just the technology of audio recording really augmented my abilities in the voiceover industry because I already knew how to work a mic, different types of microphones, what they would do, what they sounded like. So it helped a great deal. And I remember calling into a radio interview at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a station in Salt Lake City, I believe. I was in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and I stayed up and I could get the radio in on the thing. I was a huge radio fan. And I listened to Charlton Heston do a live call-in interview show, and I got in and I called in.
What?
And I said, Mr. Heston, I'm a radio DJ, but I want to be an actor, and will this experience help me in my acting as well? Absolutely. It's all performance and learning how to use your voice. So he was very encouraging, and I had forgotten all about that call until just recently that, oh yeah, I talked to Charlton Heston on the phone. That was really cool. So he was very encouraging, and he basically said, well, if you think about all the great voice actors from the old days, Dawes Butler, Mel Blanc, all of those guys started in radio when there was no TV. It was only radio, and you were listening to these national radio shows, Jack Benny and all these other comedy shows. So they'd have Jack Benny, they'd have Roscoe, and they'd have the regular cast, but they'd have Dawes Butler and Mel Blanc come in and do various voices of characters in the radio thing. So radio and voiceover go hand in hand, and always have, and probably always will be. And strangely enough, when you get a group of actors together in an ensemble and you record basically the script for the animators to animate to, when they get all the takes, all the selects finished, and they edit it all together and they send it to the animators, they call it the radio show.
Do they really?
Yeah. The complete finished audio of just the voices that they want to send to the animators to have them start animating, they call it the radio show. So, well, send over the radio show. So that's because it is basically a radio show. It's a bunch of actors, and all you do is you hear them. But it's crazy to watch Frank Welker and Phil Lamar and some of these other great actors who you think that, oh, it's just voice acting, you're standing behind a microphone. No, they're in character. When you see them in the studio in an ensemble situation, and Mark Hamill, same thing, you're watching them, they're acting. There's just no camera on them, but they're completely engaged in the character, and their physicality is this and that. It's almost like they were on camera. There's just no camera. Of course, that's up to the animators to bring forth visually. But yet there's no difference between on camera and voice acting in that way. Acting is acting, and it always charms me when people say, hey, people tell me I have a really good voice. I should be a voice actor. Well, have you ever acted? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be a voice actor. It's like, well, acting is acting, so you kind of gotta get your acting chops up and then utilize what you've learned as an actor and then put it into just the voice format only, if you don't want to have them pull your hair and spray it and put makeup all over your face and do all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun in that regard, where you don't have to worry about that. You can virtually every day on the Tonight Show, the 4.5 years I worked there, every day I think I showed up in shorts and a tank top and sandals or Vans. And I'm like, and a baseball cap. I'm like, this is great. I'm the announcer of the Tonight Show, and I'm totally comfortable. But everybody else is in a suit, and the minute Jay would finish the show, he'd be out of that suit and back in his denim, shirt. he couldn't take any more than I could. But he was the on camera, so he kind of had to do that. But I don't mind so much dressing up and the costumes and everything. It's kind of cute. I did a radio or a TV commercial about back in 2016 as a glam rocker, and that was kind of fun. But I'm like, yeah, I really kind of love voiceover more. But I'm opening now more to the idea of on camera. That's one of the things I was going to start exploring in 2020 before everything blew up, was doing more of that, because I'm like, well, okay, I'm kind of at the point in my life where I'm okay being a type. I'm like, okay, well, if you need the Zach type, but older, yeah, thank you. If you need that type, call that guy in. But and I'm like, you know what? I'm not shaving. I'm not cutting my hair. This is what you get. If you want the nutty neighbor next door who might be on drugs, maybe not, maybe just has PTSD, who knows what he has. If you want that guy that's kind of funny, can deliver lines and have a certain look, that's me. If you want some clean-shaven guy with short hair, not me. Look elsewhere. So I'm kind of opening up to that possibility, but we'll see if that ever turns around.
Well, I mean, the clean-shaven short hair. I mean, there's a million of those, but I would argue there's only one Wally Wingert. And it's interesting, though also entirely understandable, that you are finally venturing to this on-camera stuff, because you've pretty much conquered every other art form, to be honest. Real quick, before we start with voice acting, which a lot of viewers watching know you from, I kind of want to talk about an art form that you post a lot about on social media that I want to kind of dive into. That's going to be puppetry. Now, when I was going to interview you, I thought I had it all figured out. I knew you were a musician, a voice actor, acting. I had no idea you were also a puppeteer. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, I'd love to. Me and everybody else watching would love to hear some of that.
It was something I've been doing for a really, really long time. And there's a picture, I think, up on my website of a 2-year-old me being amazed that my great-grandfather had this hand-carved wooden puppet that he was making dance. And I think that was the start of it all, to where I thought, I said, this is great. So I played with puppets as a kid, and I've always been fascinated with puppets. I have a puppet room in my house, and I started building when I was about 18 or 19, because I wanted to be a Muppet performer. More than anything in the world, I want to be a Muppet performer. But when you're living in the Midwest and you're basically making Muppets, because I wanted to prove to them, hey, I can make your kind of puppets, I can do your voices, I can do your kind of puppetry. I put a demo together for a high school TV project, and I sent it to them, and they sent me a cease and desist. Not a job offer. They sent me a cease and desist. So I was more like this guy, like, yeah, well, pull on you then. I don't want to be a puppeteer anymore. Go away. Yeah, you bother me. Hi, Zach. How are you?
What's going on, Oscar?
How are you? I came out of the can for your interview. Isn't this amazing? I'd only do this for you.
I have never once been more flattered, yet honored.
Hey, who's that guy? You look familiar. Anyway. All right, well, I just wanted to say hi and scram. I'm going to go back into the can now.
Perhaps he, too, maybe met my mom back in the day as well. So they send you the cease and desist, which, the audacity, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, here you are, plucky, ready to conquer the world and actually help them, and they shove it right in your face.
Well, I found out years later, because I'm friends with a couple of the Muppet performers now and a couple of the guys who had worked for Henson. And they saw the cease and desist letter, which is hanging up proudly on my wall in my puppet room. and one puppeteer said, who had worked with Jim Henson on Dark Crystal, had said, I know why you got that letter. And I said, really? And he said, Jim never saw your tape. Had he seen your tape, things would have been different, because he loved to cultivate talent like that with people who had potential. But he never saw your tape, and I know why. I'm like, why? He said, look at the date on the letter. And the date on the letter was the exact time that Jim was over in the UK working on Dark Crystal. So my tape shows up to his New York office. People are like, well, I don't know. What should we do with this? Well, the guy's making Muppets, so go to legal. So they go to legal. And that guy's like, okay, we got to stop making Muppets. You know, had Jim Henson actually been in the States then, my life could have been more like Dave Goell's life, where, you know, he had an interest in that and he contacted Jim Henson, and Jim Henson cultivated his ability and brought him into the troupe. So I always said that Dave Goelz, who's Gonzo and a bunch of other characters, Bunsen Honeydew, always had my life. He had my alternate life. That's what would have, but you know, Dave lived out in California, so he was here and he could meet with them easily. I was in South Dakota and, you know, whatever. So,
Sure.
yeah.
But in that parallel universe, I mean, yeah, your life would have been a lot like Dave Goelz, but also the world would be robbed of a Wally Wingert that we all know and love today, which perfect segue into my next segment. But before we start,
thank you for saying that. As I always say, it all works out.
It definitely does.
There was a reason that I wasn't supposed to be a puppeteer, and maybe this was it. So,
I mean, it certainly was, and you certainly made the best of it. But before we explore that, just want to let you guys know, because he brought up a good point. On his website, there are plenty of both fun and informative pictures and posts, which you can find if you're watching live on Facebook. Marissa was kind enough to put his website and some of his social media links all in the live chat, or if you're watching later on YouTube, they're going to be in the description below. Thank you, Marissa. As always, you're the wind beneath my sails. So, Wally Wingert, one of the most famous voice actors of our generation. How did we all begin? What was your first big role that you think really put you on the map? Now, keep in mind, everybody, if you check out Wally's IMDb page, miles long. We'd be here all day if we talked about each character. But what I'm curious about, I do want to touch on a few, but the first one I'm curious about is, what do you think was your first major role?
Oh, that's a hard one because it depends on who you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been Sideburn in the old Transformers show called Robots in Disguise, the old one. It could have been Renji and Bleach. Probably Invader Zim. Tallest Red in Invader Zim was probably the first, because I had already been working on Family Guy, but as a bunch of different characters. Strangely enough, trivia question, my first job on Family Guy was doing the voice of Bert from Sesame Street, a voice that I had done since 5th grade. So they comb the whole town. We got to find a Bert. Seth can do Ernie, but he can't do Bert, and they're looking for a Bert. I'm like, oh, I can do Bert. That's easy. Ernie, I hate it when you make cookies in the damn bed. So I thought, well, I've done that since 5th grade. And then I got the role and then started working on Family Guy on a regular basis. But I was just a bunch of random characters. I was like the Mel Blanc or the Dawes Butler of the radio shows that I talked about earlier. I was just random guys. But when I got on Invader Zim, I actually had my own character. And that's probably the first time that I had ever gotten a character that was specifically mine on an ongoing basis. And I think that's the first time that a toy had ever been created for a character I had done that was me. Not me voicing another character that was Japanese. I was just the English voice, but it had pre-existed before. No, there was no other Tallest Red. It was my character. So I was kind of proud when that toy came out. I'm like, wow, this is my character. So that probably Invader Zim would probably be it. Come to think of it.
Was Invader Zim as fun to work in as some of the other guests that we've interviewed said it was? Because, I mean, we had Richard Horvitz, Ricky Simons, and Melissa Fahn on the show. And let me about that interview. I loved that interview, don't get me wrong, but you thought you could talk.
Did you interview them all at the same time?
All at the same time.
Oh, my gosh.
And let me tell you what, that was a great and fun interview, but Richard Horvitz definitely ran that interview. I just hit the play and the stop button, and I was loving every second of it. So was it as fun?
Yeah, that's him. That's him.
And I had a blast. Now, was it as fun of a show as they had on it for you?
Twinkie break, by the way.
Hey.
Yeah, it was really cool. So many funny stories that I don't even know where to begin. It was abject hilarity. It was really kind of crazy. And Jonan's view of the world was so skewed. I was really charmed by that. But the funniest day was when Kevin McDonald, who played Tallest Purple, and they would keep us together, isolated, because we had a lot of our lines together. They keep Horvitz in an ISO booth, which is short for isolation, because he was always yelling and screaming, and they wanted to be able to shut him off whenever they wanted to. But more importantly, they didn't want his screaming, yelling to bleed over into our microphone, so he was in the ISO booth most of the time. And it was kind of tough to see him in there because the glass was, a certain direction. But one day they had Zim saying, my tallest, my tallest, my tallest, my tallest. And they had Kevin Purple eating something and just going basically like, what? 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 And so in order to do that, now normally you don't eat when you're really doing something because you have this where you can't talk anymore. If you're eating something during a line read, I was talking to Tabby about this via chat. You have to know how to fake it with your tongue so you can still have the lines be intelligible, but you have to sound like you're eating. So, but if you really eat, there's the danger that the line won't be intelligible. But all he was saying was what, and that was pretty easy to understand. So they brought him a bagel from the Nickelodeon commissary, wrapped in a napkin, because they didn't want to get their fingers on it. And they said, here, Kevin, chew this because we really want to hear the food, because the animation will be spitting out of your mouth and everything. So Kevin's so into the moment that he's going, what? What? Not realizing that he's biting off pieces of the napkin along with the bagel. So he's got a piece of napkin hanging in his mouth. What? Not knowing he's eating this napkin. You take another bite, more napkin. What? What? It was hilarious. So all of us, we can't ruin the take. We can't laugh.
Sure.
I'm doubled over trying not to laugh, and I look in the control room, and all the people in the control room were all on the floor. There was nobody. There's no heads. They were all doubled over on the floor, laughing because they were watching Kevin unknowingly devour this napkin, which was really funny. But yeah, that show should have gone on for 20 years. I wish Netflix would, the Florpus movie, broke records or whatever. It was listed as the 6th most important animated event of the year by a bunch of people who seem to know more about this stuff. I don't know why they don't just do a series again. I think the audience would love it. I think the people who are Zim fans would dig it. I don't know. I would love to. I would do that show till the end of time and be happy about it because.
It doesn't seem that like Netflix or Nickelodeon, whatever you want to blame it on, it kind of seems like they're just allergic to money, because if there were ever a surefire hit that you should bring back, it was Invader Zim.
Right.
Speaking of a series,
mean that show that's been selling toys in Hot Topic for 22 years without a show, without a new show, without new episodes being produced?
To this day, my girlfriend and I were at Hot Topic the other day, and they still had Zim merch, and I mean, and rightfully so. It was a great show. But speaking of a show that is returning, though we're not going to talk about the returning part of it, we're actually going to talk about its original series. I want to talk about Bleach a little bit. Now, you voice Renji, and growing up, obviously you were, introduced to cartoons, voiceovers, video games, of course, common in this culture. Anime, however, is its own kind of beast that I would argue that people in the West kind of have to go more out of their way in order to enjoy and kind of ingest. So were you a fan of anime growing up, or was it later in life when you started working in the industry that you kind of got introduced to it?
I loved, for a little bit when I was a kid, I loved Astro Boy, but I didn't really understand anime or that it was produced in Japan or whatever. So Astro Boy, because it ran on NBC for a while over here in, I think, the 60s, was really the only, I loved the record. I have the 45. Hold on, can I show you this?
Oh, sick, yeah. Well, behind the scenes. I
have the Astro Boy record up there, see?
That's sick.
There you go, Astro Boy. I love that record when I was a kid, and I played the grooves out of it. So that was really the only anime that I was aware of, but I didn't even know that it was anime. It was just a cartoon to me. But it wasn't until years later when they said, well, they'll hire you to come in and, replace the Japanese voice on these shows like Power Rangers and things like that. I said, oh, that's kind of cool. So I can't remember what the first anime thing I did was, but it was cool because you have to look at a pre-existing mouth cycle that had been animated to another actor. Oh, actually, they don't even, I think in Japan, they don't even animate to the actors' mouths like they do here. They animate what they think it is, and then the actors over there have to, and they all get together in a group. Now, anime, when it's dubbed here, is dubbed individually. The actor goes in for 2 hours and just does their lines and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I wasn't even really aware of the word anime until late 90s, probably, when I started working. And I'm like, well, what is this again? Well, it's Japanese cartoons, but, dubbed to English. Oh, okay. So I have to put my voice into the flaps, the amount of flaps. And to be honest, some of the anime actors I know who dub that are some of the best actors around because they're so tethered by the technology. First of all, you have to stay in voice. Secondly, your acting has to be good. And thirdly, you have to fit in the flaps. So you have all these cement rings around your ankles and you're trying to run a marathon. So you're so tethered by all of the stuff that now if you're doing an original American animated show, you get in a group of actors, and if you want to take a little extra long on a certain line to get a point across, you can do so. And they may use the take, they may not, but you have the freedom to at least explore that. With anime, you don't. You have to start talking when they open their mouth and stop talking when they close their mouth. Now, the exception would be Tiger and Bunny, to where you have, or Transformers Robots in Disguise, is where you have helmets on. So if you have a helmet on, you're not tethered by mouth movements anymore. You can use whatever space is available in the amount of time that the character's on screen, because you got the helmet hiding your mouth. So it's a little more freeing, which is one of the reasons I liked Tiger and Bunny so much, is because he was on camera and the helmet was on his head, and he was talking, he's moving his head around. But if you wanted to add a couple extra words or maybe ad lib a funny joke or something, you could, because you weren't tethered by the thing. So that was kind of fun. Of all the animated stuff, I think Tiger and Bunny is probably my favorite because I've seen all the episodes, and it's the thing I think I'm most proud of in the world of anime, because I love that show. It's got a lot of heart, a lot of soul, a lot of action, and the story's good. The premise is great. So I love that.
I started watching that show on a whim because I had literally, way before this, I want to say, when this show first came out on Netflix, I was bored one day, had watched literally everything else that I wanted to watch on Netflix. I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And I loved it. I mean, you and Yuri's performances were magnificent. The story was great. The characters were dynamic and relatable. And guys, if you have Netflix or have access to anything that gives you guys, animated series, I highly recommend you guys watch Tiger and Bunny, because it is amazing.
Thank you. I agree. There's just a lot going for that show. It was nice and short. It had a nice arc, and you could start it and end it, and like, oh, okay, well, that was a nice 26-part story. But there, the casting that Jamie Simone did for that was amazing. And the fact that they let us ad lib some stuff was terrific. And yeah, hard to believe when you see that show that those actors were not in the same room together when we did that. It just all sounds so cohesive, but we all recorded separately. And I had the good fortune of being, I think, the last guy to dub my lines. Everybody else had pretty much already been in.
Oh, wow.
Because I was so busy at the time with the Tonight Show that I couldn't get time to go over there to dub. But we had like a 2-week hiatus or something on Tonight Show. So I said to Jamie, I said, well, now's the time. Let's do these and blow them out, because I don't have 2 weeks of Tonight Show. So I went in, a couple, 3 days, did some long sessions, and we got a lot of it done. But it was nice for me to be able to go in, and I was the missing piece in this amazing puzzle, but I could hear all the other performances that had already been laid down, Yuri's and everybody else's. And that helped a great deal in that, I could respond they say that acting is reacting. I could react to what they were saying and then hear what their reaction to my line would have been, even though they didn't hear my line, and then kind of tailor the way I left the end of the line to like more closely lead into what their reaction was. You see what I mean? Because
Yeah.
there's a certain musicality to a conversation. And if I hear, okay, he's coming back in with this tone of his voice, well, I'm going to end the previous line with something that would logically sound like it would make him sound like this when he responds. That's a long, hard, difficult way of explaining that.
Totally following.
But yeah, it all, that's why it's so seamless. But when you record separately like that, and more celebrities that got into animation, they had this problem, is that with their schedules, they all can't get together as an ensemble and read a whole radio show together. So sometimes you have to piecemeal this stuff with, well, his schedule is this, so we got him for 2 hours, we got him for another 2 hours, but we have to all piece it together. And the genius really is upon the voice director to fit this big picture puzzle all together. Otherwise, you're going to have all of these different voices coming from all these different things, and they're not going to even sound like they're in the same room. There are some films that I can definitely tell when I hear it's like, yeah, those people, they never even met each other, let alone being in the same room together doing this stuff. So, but that's the talent of a good voice director, is to be able to see the big picture. For example, let me digress.
Go for it.
The Return of the Cape Crusaders, starring Adam West, Burt Ward, and then Batman versus Two-Face, which was the follow-up, which starred Adam West, Burt Ward, and William Shatner. Now, none of those people recorded together. They all recorded them separately. But it all sounded, and so did I, and so did Jeff and everybody else, recorded their pieces separately. But because the voice direction was so good, it sounded like we were all in the room together, because they just had a great, James Tucker and company just had a great overall view of how this was going to get together. So that's where a good voice director really does come into play. So that's kind of neat.
So going back to Tiger and Bunny, I mean, you were fortunate enough to be one of the last people to dub your lines, so you could more easily play off your co-stars. But, through your long list of, awards and performances, I'm sure you've been on the opposite end where you were one of the first people to dub their lines. Now, how much harder is that, having to try to preemptively voice these characters so that the people dubbing after you can more easily play off of them?
Well, if you're first in line, if you're the first to take the bullet, you take your cues from the Japanese track, and you really listen to kind of what the Japanese voice actor was doing. And even though you may not understand the actual words, you try and glean from that some intent dramatically to see kind of what they're doing. And sometimes, they're way off. And the director will say, man, don't listen to the Japanese guy. We're going to do it a little differently. I'm like, okay. But without the other English actors already in place, that's really the only reference you have for that sort of thing is basically just what they've done. So yeah, it's an interesting process. And it used to be a lot more cumbersome back in the days of 3/4-inch tape, where the cartoons would come in on a big 3/4-inch tape. You'd have to rewind, go back and forth, and rewind and shuttle back and forth. Well, now in digital, you just put it in as a file. And if you don't quite match the lip flap from here to here, but the performance was good, sometimes they'll just say, I can stretch that a little bit. So they'll just digitally stretch it a few frames and it fits in perfectly. Or if you're out there acting your butt off, and you're doing a really great, but they like the performance, but it went a little long, they can squish it in. And but it's all digital. So digital has really changed, of course, changed animation, but it really changed anime dubbing because of all the freedoms now you have to take a great performance. And it's like, well, it's like I said earlier, the three things: you have to be in voice, your acting has to be good, and you have to have the timing. Well, if you're in good voice and the acting is good, the timing now can kind of be fudged by the engineer and the digital capabilities that they have, which is nice because it frees us up now to just focus more on that and not have to worry so much about lip flaps. But it's a beautiful thing. I like it, and I don't know if you know this or not, but anime dubbing does not pay very well.
Multiple people have been on the
Yeah.
show and have told everybody watching, and this kind of actually segments my way to my final segment before we do the plug zone. They have said if you want to specialize in just anime dubbing, don't quit your day job because
Right. Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily. You can't.
It's a job. It's a job you do for fun. It's a gig you do for fun, and to keep your chops up with ADR dubbing and what they call it looping, and it's because good people are involved. And I love working with Jamie Simone, and I love working with all the Studiopolis people, and everybody else that I've ever worked with in anime has been great. So it's something you've got to do because you really, really love it. It's nothing you're going to get rich on. But hey, you know what? If I'm Renji and I'm Wild Tiger and a couple other cool anime characters, and there's some toys that come out, as you can see, I'm kind of a toy fan.
Yeah.
So if there's some toys of the characters that come out, it's like, hey, yeah, that's my character, so I can collect that, and it's kind of a fun thing. And then, of course, the autograph shows, which I've never done a lot of, but I'm starting to get out and do more of that as well. And my thing about the autograph shows was always where the conventions, like yours, where do I really want to roll some kid for $30 for a signed Garfield John Arbuckle picture? I don't know. That kind of creeps me out. But so I never really did a lot of those conventions as a signer because I'm like, I don't charge. I'm sorry. I can't with good conscience charge for my signature. If you want to pay me a talent fee, an appearance fee, I'll show up and take your money, but I'm not going to roll a kid for $30 for a Renji picture. So, but later it was explained to me, and this is what changed my view on it. Well, it's not that they're paying for your signature because they can get that through the mail. They're paying for the experience of meeting you and talking to you about the character and getting a picture. And I'm like, okay, well that I get because I would do that at a show with Flash Gordon or whomever my hero was that I got to finally meet and have him sign my poster. So, and then another thing happened to where I was at Monster Palooza last year in Burbank, and it was publicized I was going to be there emceeing some panels, much like you do. And but I didn't have a table or anything, but I was just going to be there, doing these panels. So this poor little gal came up with an Arkham Asylum poster.
Hey.
And it had been signed by everyone but me. And I'm like, wow, how'd you get that? Well, I go to these autograph shows and it's my thing. I want to get, and I've been waiting to get you to do it, but you just never do these. And I'm like, yeah, I get it because I'm a completionist too. I like to have the entire cast of Dark Shadows on a poster. I like to have the entire cast of something on a signed something. So I kind of get it. And I'm like, all right. And I signed it for him. Like, yeah, maybe I better get out a little more because there are completionists like me who say, he's the last piece in the puzzle and I need to go out and get that. I'm like, okay. So, once everything gets rolling again, I want to start getting out more. I love to travel. I love meeting people. And I've kind of gotten over that weird charging for an autograph thing because I give a portion of it to charity. And, a lot of it is just expenses to just go. I went to Orlando for a Power Ranger convention last November. And I made a few bucks, but it wasn't really about that. It was about meeting the great people, and a guy who had dressed up as the Riddler, like the Arkham Riddler, had driven something like 6 hours to meet me and get a picture and talk. And then he's like, all right, well, see you later. I'm like, where are you off to? He's like, oh, I'm heading back. You drove 6 hours to sit here and talk to me and have me sign this thing, and now you're going to drive back? Yeah, because it was important. I'm like, oh my gosh, that blows my mind. So
Sweet.
I'm like, okay, well, maybe I better get out and do some more of this stuff. And I got to go to, Disney World and hear my voice on Pirates of the Caribbean, which was a trip, and it was kind of cool. So I want to do more of that, and I want to get out more and meet people because I love meeting people and do all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds.
You're definitely a man of the people. And before we go into my final question, you said you did MC work too?
Yes. Well, through radio, remember?
Sure. But like in panels as well.
Yes. Moderating panels at Monsterpalooza, which is something I just kind of started doing the past couple of years. But I've done emceeing since I was 16.
Maybe
Showing up and doing hosting stuff. So
maybe I do need to talk to my mom after this.
Yeah.
Wally, I got one final question for you before.
You have a picture of her around. I might.
One final question before we roll into the plug zone and then viewers' comments and questions. Which, on that note, guys, I know plenty of you already have either asked in the live chats on Facebook or have messaged Visioncon directly to ask your questions. Whatever is more convenient for you. But you do have a couple more minutes to do that before we go to viewers' comments and questions. But my final question for you, Wally, is a lot of people who watch this show are aspiring voice actors who want to take the plunge and make this their profession. So let us pretend that I am the physical embodiment of everybody watching at home, either live on Facebook or in YouTube later. What advice would you give me to get into voice acting and to maybe one day become the next Wally Wingert?
Oh, God forbid that should ever happen. My life is a mess. No, it's great. It's a charmed, blessed, beautiful life, and I'm just so thankful. I jest out of self-deprecation and humor, but no, it's been an amazing ride so far. Act. Of course, work on character voices and coming up with creative characters. But remember, these are not just voices. These are full, rounded, developed characters. It's why you can't just recast the voice of Homer Simpson. It's got to be Dan because he is Homer Simpson. That character is him. Sure, people can imitate Bugs Bunny and Homer Simpson and all these other characters, but can you really embody that character? Can you sing as the character? Can you improvise as the character? Can you, read the lines on the page and make it sound like it's coming out of your head? So it's pretty interesting in that it really is acting. It really is taking somebody else's words and making it sound like it's coming off the top of your head. So act, get in community theater, get into college theater, high school plays, whatever. And then if you decide that you don't want to do any on-camera stuff and you do just want to focus on voiceover only, then really work on those characters, because there's a certain way when you can't see you and you just hear you, you don't have the ability to just kind of do this and get a point across. You can't just do that because you can't hear you. So you kind of have to do it verbally. And you can bring a whole thought across. You can convey a whole idea or a thought with just a breath or just a small vocalization, where you don't even really need to have it be verbal, where you can just kind of go, that kind of thing, because that will convey a thought. It's like, well, that's uneasiness, or maybe he's in an uncomfortable moment, and there was no words ever spoken. Like, okay, well, here we go. So there's all sorts of little vocalization tricks that you can do within the dialogue to bring a point across, because you don't have the ability to be seen to do the kind of thing where, an on-camera actor would have that and he doesn't need to say anything, but a voice actor would. So that's another way to pretend that nobody can see you. And if you are just trying to convey an idea verbally or on the phone or whatever, how would you do that if all you had was just your voice? And that's kind of part of the fun. So,
okay. Well, thank you so much, Wally. Now, guys,
are we done already?
Oh God, no! We're not quite done
yet.
We're about to go into the plug zone, but before we do, I would be remiss if we didn't take just a quick time to thank someone watching right now, through which this interview would not be possible without. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank one Tabitha Whitelaw. Now, I started with this story before we started recording, so let me reiterate it. After, I want to say, and now Tabitha, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was after Derek Stephen Prince's interview, you had approached me and was like, hey, was a big fan, you did a great job, which, thank you. But, I'm a friends with Quentin Flynn and Wally Wingert, and I feel like I could talk to them, they'd probably be on the show. Tabitha, I'm going to be honest, We both adore you. But I was thinking then, there is like a 5% chance this girl's for real. But I decided, you know what, hey, why not? I have nothing to lose. So I was like, yeah, sure, if you would like to. And then sure enough, not a day later, I get a message from Quentin Flynn. He's in. And then about a week or two from today, I get a message from you that you were in. I was like, Tabitha. So Tabitha, we love you. Thank you so much for making this possible. You're the best. And
she's a go-getter.
Oh, she certainly is. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is your final time, if you haven't already, either messaged Visioncon directly or commented in the live chat your questions or comments for Wally Wingert, because, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the plug zone. Wally Wingert, now is your time to promote, advertise, plug, whatever verb you want to use, anything you want. The floor is yours, sir. Oh.
I got nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Well, the problem is there's all kinds of stuff happening,
Sure.
but it's all NDA stuff, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Naturally.
Non-disclosure agreement. As soon as social media started to become the big thing, you can't really talk about much. They make you sign all kinds of stuff. So they're having you sign NDAs now, even for auditions, where you can't audition for this unless you don't tell anybody that you auditioned for this. And it's pretty goofy. But it's what it is, because people go on social media. Hey, I just read for this new commercial for Tom's Pizzeria, and it's like a robot, like it's going to be like a transformer type of robot. Where then Bill's Pizzeria, the competitor, will steal the idea before they get a chance to do it. So you can't really say much. But there's I've been working on for past couple of years some tracks for an animated film, which I hope actually sees the light of day. It's very clever. And that's in the offing. And there was also a very famous video game franchise, which is being rebooted. And they're going to come out with a brand new video game. But as a precursor to that, to kind of apprise everybody of what the story in the video game is, they're coming out with an 1.5-hour animated feature first. And then you see that and go, okay, well, now I'm in this world, and now I know how this world applies to this franchise. And then you go play the video game based on the world that you've seen in the animated film. So it's pretty clever, but everything, is on hold. So we'll see when that gets back to it. But script was great. The acting was great. A lot of fun. And we hopefully that'll be out soon. I'm still doing some stuff from home for the Ellen DeGeneres show. I'll do stuff for her every once in a while, character voices. And I still do little radio commercial things here and there. And so, yeah, but unfortunately not a lot of stuff that you can, really chat freely about, because I'll get in trouble.
Oh, sure. But like NDAs aside, I mean, what if the viewers watching right now, obviously we all love you, but what if they want, what? I want a little more Wally in my day. I feel like I could have worded that better. Don't take that out of context. Well, what if they social media is what I'm getting at. Where can they follow you on social media to kind of get more of your zany and, fun humor?
Well, I don't have Facebook anymore, but I have a Twitter, and I believe that's at Wally Wingert, and Instagram is wally.wingert. And rest assured, you will never get bogged down with any political views or anything controversial or anything like that. It's all pets, puppets, pizza, breakfast cereals, cartoons, Muppets, that kind of stuff. So it's a safe zone for anybody who, like me, is allergic to politics, as a proud APOL, an apolitical guy. But it's a lot of fun. And if you want to come on and learn anything about the Riddler, happy to do that. But it's all just goofy stuff and fun, and I always said if I ever was into politics, I'd start the logician party, where it's all logic. Spock would be president because he's purely logical, not emotional, and he would only do the stuff that's logical. Because I've seen in my lifetime so much illogical stuff happen. I'm like, that's the only way I'd ever get involved in politics is if Mr. Spock was president, and it was purely logical. So until that happens, you can go to Wally Wingert's Logical Mind at Wally Wingert and just learn more about any puppets I'm making. I've had a lot of time on my hands, so I've made 3 or 4 new puppets, and I'm still in the process, and I love doing that because, like I said, I got to the point where I'm like, I wonder if I can still build a puppet like I used to when I was a kid. So got the fabrics and the glues and the foam rubbers and all the paints and everything I needed. So just having fun sitting in my kitchen, staying up all night, just listening to music and cutting out fabric and building puppets.
Well, in a lot of ways, breakfast cereal, puppies, and puppets are what the world, always needs. So, and you're just providing that. Well, and guys, like we mentioned earlier, all of those links that he mentioned, plus his website, are, if you're watching live on Facebook, in the live chat, or if you're watching this later on YouTube, going to be in the description below. And with that, we're out of the plug zone, guys. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are official in our final act for this evening. We're in viewers' comments and questions. So Marissa has compiled a bunch of your guys' questions and comments and have sent it to me. So I'll pull those up real quick. Thank you again, Marissa. Like I always say, you're the wind beneath my sails. Alrighty, guys. Well, first off, Tabitha, love you, Tabitha, asks, do you have a most prized piece in your collectibles collection? You have a lot of collectibles.
Yes.
Oh, easy.
Abby normal.
As you can see, I have a lot of collectibles and crazy stuff. But the prized possession is probably my Andy Kaufman performance costume. He was a comedian that I loved when I was a kid, and actually spent a fair amount of time performing his Foreign Man character when I was a kid, and even corresponded with him a little bit and got some letters from him. But years later, I came across the opportunity to purchase his original performance costume that he had worn many times on many shows, ABC, PBS, Saturday Night Live, Tonight Show, and that's probably my prized possession is Andy's original performance costume. I also have his first Elvis costume. I have a costume he wore in Heart Beeps, which is a movie he played as a robot. So and I have some like records that were in his collection and everything. So it's pretty fun. I love that stuff. But that's probably my prize because there's only one of it in the world. It's not like they made 35 Darth Vader costumes, and you have one of the 35. No, this is it. If anything, God forbid, happens to it, then the history is lost.
Oh God forbid. Well, Marissa wrote in her own question. She wanted to know, Wally, you seem like such a radiant spirit. I agree, by the way. Radiant spirit, so full of positive.
It's the lighting. It's just the lighting. It's the halo effect on the.
She says so much positivity and love. Take two. So much positivity and love. How do you keep that energy?
Chasing girls.
Okay.
No, I just the way to keep it is to not dilute it with drugs, alcohol, gambling, bad influences, that kind of thing. I hate to sound really trite, but I'm high on life. I like little things. I sit on my patio some mornings with an iced tea and watch the day break. We have something in Los Angeles called June gloom, to where it seems like all of June every year, right around 4 a.m, it can be a completely clear night, but it will sock in with clouds and be completely overcast till about noon. Well, it's the most beautiful thing as the sun rises, because you don't ever see the sun because of the cloud cover, but it goes from this dark blue to like a lighter blue to like a whitish blue, and I call it a blue morning. And I'll just sit there, feel the cool breeze, and watch the blue morning dawn, have an iced tea, and I wait for the first morning dove to coo of the day. And I'm like, okay, wait for it. All of a sudden, this, and then they coo. I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. So I don't know if I know if that's getting old or if it's just appreciating the little things in life. The poet Rumi once said, if you're not amazed, you're not paying attention. And there's amazing things that happen in life all the time, but you gotta just pay attention and you just gotta be conscious of it. So I try and appreciate those little things. And I also say, this is the poet Wally that says, cure depression, build more dog parks, because you just never see depressed people at dog parks. I've been to a lot of dog parks with my dog, and you just never see people sitting around going, woe is me. Oh boy. No, everybody's happy and they're talking to each other. They're showing their dogs off, and dogs are sniffing and they're playing, and it's great. So yeah, it's the appreciation for the little things in life, and that'll take you a long way, I think.
And that's a valid point about the dog park as well. I don't think I've ever seen a depressed person in a dog park either.
Right.
Guys, we have time for 2 more questions. Lane,
Really?
just 2. Well, Lane wrote in and wanted to know, of all the characters you voiced, which character or characters do you think you would be best friends with? And in contrast, which characters do you think you would not get along with?
Well, I wouldn't get along with the Riddler.
Okay, naturally.
He doesn't seem to want to get along really with anybody, even though I do turn into him when I'm in heavy LA traffic, which is funny because people most often show their idiocy when they're driving. Yeah. Where'd you learn to drive like that, you absolute imbecile? Get off the road. I turn into him. Probably him would not be. John Arbuckle seems like a nice guy, but he's a little too dorky for me, probably, but he does love his dog and his cat. Ant-Man, Hank Pym, seems a little too stuffy and arrogant. I don't know. Tallest Red? Probably not. I don't know. I play a lot of people who really are fairly unlikable. Come to think of it.
Very abrasive. I'll give them some credit. All right, Aaron, you're going to round us out. Now, I'm going to give you some warning with Aaron, Wally. Now, Aaron, you're watching this. We love you. But you are notorious for having slightly complicated questions. So we'll give it a shot, Aaron. Aaron wrote in and asked, what's your favorite Disney movie inspired by your involvement in the Kingdom Hearts series? Oh, Aaron, it's actually not bad.
Well, did Jungle Book, the original Jungle Book, ever play into the Kingdom Hearts series at all?
It definitely didn't.
Okay. Being not that familiar with the Kingdom Hearts, I'd done some stuff for it as Cubby from Peter Pan. The kid that talks like this. Hey, Peter, where's Wendy? But aside from that, Jungle Book is my favorite Disney movie.
Okay.
It's my favorite animated film. I saw it when I was a kid. When it came out, my dad took me. And we bought the soundtrack afterwards because we liked the music. And I still have it. But when we opened up the album, the record album, not a CD, not digital, you actually had to put something to play with a stylus. When you opened it up, there was artwork inside of pictures of the actors, the voice actors, Phil Harris, Sebastian Cabot, Chad and Jeremy, and J. Pat O'Malley, with their animated counterparts. They had taken a picture of them like that, and then the Disney artist drew in the character that they voiced next to them. And it blew my young mind. I'm like, well, I know that character from the movie, but who's that guy? And, my dad would have to explain that, well, that was the guy who gave him his voice for the cartoon. Oh, okay. And I still have it because that put lit a light in my head. It's like, oh, so the cartoons have to have guys who voice them. Okay, I get it. So I still love that. So, but that didn't really answer your question because, like I said, I'm just not that familiar with Kingdom Hearts to know which Disney movies they accessed for those games. I'll say Peter Pan.
There you go.
That's a safe one. Yeah, Peter Pan. Yep.
Well, like I was saying, Aaron, we love you, but this might be hard to imagine, but that was a tame one for Aaron. But ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we got. So this has been episode 13 of Visioncon Live. Wally, before we wrap things up, you want any final thoughts or things to say to the audience?
I can't think of anything unless we want to say goodbye to this guy one more time. Sorry, he's the only one I have handy. But
well, here, before you do that, actually, let's do the outro, and then we'll finish on that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 13 of VisionCon Live. Now, guys, the powers that be, my bosses at VisionCon told me I can't tell you guys the definitive dates yet, for the upcoming episode of Visioncon Live. But ladies and gentlemen, they didn't say anything about me not telling you who's coming. So I'll tell you, without telling you the definitive dates, I'll tell you who's coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be gifted by the presence of such names as Neil Kaplan. Many of you know him as Madara Uchiha from Naruto, Head Captain Yamamoto from Bleach, Optimus Prime from Transformers Robots in Disguise, just to name a few. Then we've got Lori Allen, voice of the boss from the Metal Gear series, Pearl from SpongeBob, and Diane from Family Guy, just to name a few. And of course, we've got the one and only Miley Flanagan. Many of you know her as the voice of Naruto from, well, Naruto. So like I said, those dates will be coming up and announced on VisionCon social media. Look out for those. But until then, Wally and Oscar, now's your time. Close us out.
Scram, will you? Now scram. Interview's over. Now scram. I don't want to see you no more, huh? Get out of here.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, my name's Zach Wilson, but much more importantly, these have been my special guests, Oscar and Wally Wingert. You guys take care, have a wonderful rest of your day, and always remember, guys, life's better when you have friends to share it with.